Right, so job interviews. Everyone has to do them, but they can be pretty nerve-wracking.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're diving into an episode from Pathway to Work.
Okay.
It's called Mastering the Job Interview with Emotional Intelligence.
Interesting.
It basically says that emotional intelligence can be a secret weapon for acing those interviews.
That's not the way we normally think about interview prep, is it?
Right. We usually just think about, showcasing skills and experience.
Yeah.
But this episode argues that emotional intelligence might be just as important.
Okay, I'm curious.
So the episode dives into 3 main parts of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness, emotional regulation, and empathy. And to be honest, when I first saw those,
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure how they connected to job interviews.
Well, self-awareness in an interview, I guess, is about being able to articulate your strengths to an interviewer
Okay.
in a way that's genuine and compelling.
So it's not just about, knowing your strengths. It's about really being able to talk about them.
Yes. It's about understanding your career journey, like what motivates you and what you really want from this next role.
That's a good point. So it's not just reciting a bunch of skills from your resume.
Right.
It's about connecting those skills to, your personal narrative and sharing that with the interviewer.
Yes, exactly. And then there's emotional regulation.
Okay.
Interviews can be really high pressure, even for the most seasoned professional.
Absolutely.
Emotional regulation is what keeps you calm and collected and focused, even if you're feeling all those pre-interview jitters.
Right. It's about having that inner composure so you can think clearly.
Yes.
I know I've definitely stumbled in interviews when I've let my nerves get the best of me.
Oh, I think we all have.
And then finally there's empathy.
Right.
Which is not something you normally think about with a job interview.
No.
But the episode makes a good argument for why it's important.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding the interviewer's perspective, their needs, what they're looking for in a candidate.
So it's not just selling yourself.
Yeah.
It's about understanding their challenges.
Right. And positioning yourself as the solution.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting way to think about an interview.
Yeah, it is. The episode even has a story about someone who used empathy to turn a potentially disastrous interview into a job offer.
Wow. Okay.
Apparently, they were able to pick up on the interviewer's cues.
Interesting.
They realized that the interviewer was looking for someone with a very specific problem-solving approach.
Oh, wow.
And tailored their answers accordingly.
That's impressive. So it sounds like these emotional intelligence skills can be really powerful.
Definitely.
But let's talk about some specifics.
Okay.
The episode talks about some specific strategies for using emotional intelligence to prepare for an interview.
Okay.
One of the first things they suggest is reflecting on your career story.
Yeah, that's so important. It goes beyond just updating your resume.
Yeah.
It's about really thinking deeply about your choices.
Yeah.
Why did you take certain roles?
Right.
What challenges did you overcome? What did you learn along the way?
So the episode suggests an interesting exercise.
Yeah.
They want you to think about the defining moments in your career, like those turning points that shaped your path.
Yeah.
What motivated those decisions? What did you learn? By digging into those experiences, you can get a lot of clarity about your values, your motivations, and what you really want.
It's almost like an emotional audit of your career.
I like that.
And that kind of self-awareness can really help you connect with an interviewer.
Right. Because anyone could just, list skills on a resume.
Right.
But it's the why behind those skills that really make someone stand out.
Exactly.
So how do we take that self-awareness and then apply it to those common interview questions? The ones like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, or give me an example of a time you demonstrated leadership.
Right. Well, instead of just having a canned response, the episode encourages you to think about how your experiences, your values, even your weaknesses connect to those questions.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're asked about a time you failed, don't just tell the story.
Right.
Talk about what you learned from that and how it shaped your approach moving forward.
So it's not about hiding our flaws. It's about showing how we've grown from them.
Exactly.
And how that growth makes us even stronger.
Right. And the episode goes on to talk about the importance of preparing for those common questions, but not having a script.
I mean,
Instead of memorizing answers, it's about having a framework.
Oh, okay.
It's about understanding the core message you want to get across.
Yeah.
And then being able to adapt to the question and the interviewer's style.
So it's like having a mental toolbox of stories and examples that you can draw from.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to, like, force a pre-rehearsed answer.
Yes.
Into every situation.
And the episode also talks about the importance of mock interviews.
Oh, right.
This is where you can really put those frameworks to the test.
Yeah, and get feedback.
Exactly. And it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it.
Yeah.
Are you coming across as genuine? Are you enthusiastic? Are you making eye contact?
Right. It's all about that nonverbal communication.
Absolutely.
Which is a huge part of emotional intelligence.
Right. Speaking of nerves, the episode also talks about strategies for managing those pre-interview jitters. They talk about things like deep breathing exercises and visualization.
Visualization, what do they mean by that?
It's basically using your imagination to mentally rehearse the interview. So you visualize yourself walking into the room, confidently answering questions and connecting with the interviewer.
It's like creating a movie in your mind of a successful interview.
Yes.
And that can help boost your confidence.
Exactly. And the episode talks about making those visualizations as vivid as possible.
Interesting.
So imagine the room, the interviewer's face, even like the sounds and smells.
Wow. The more detail you can add, the more real it'll feel.
Right. And the episode goes on to talk about the importance of reframing your thinking.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on the fear of failure, they encourage you to reframe the interview as an opportunity.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So instead of saying, I'm so nervous, you can say, this is my chance to shine.
That's a good one. It's about embracing the challenge and seeing it as a chance to showcase your skills and your potential.
Right. And that shift in mindset can really have a big impact. When you view the interview as an opportunity rather than a threat, you naturally feel more confident and composed.
There's that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
So our beliefs and our expectations really do have a big influence on our performance.
Definitely. The episode also talks about the importance of self-care in the days leading up to the interview.
Oh, yeah.
Like getting enough sleep, eating well, and finding ways to relax and de-stress.
Right. It's all about setting yourself up for success, both physically and mentally. So we've talked about how emotional intelligence can help us prepare.
Yeah.
But what about during the interview?
Well, that's when things get really interesting. Because even with all the preparation in the world, there are always things that can happen that you just can't predict.
Yeah, like you might get a question that throws you off guard.
Right. Or the interviewer might have a communication style that you weren't expecting.
That's when staying present and being adaptable becomes so important.
Yes. And this Pathway to Work episode really emphasizes active listening. Active listening goes beyond just hearing the words. It's about paying attention to their tone, their body language, even the energy in the room.
So you're not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Right.
You're really trying to understand,
exactly
what the interviewer is asking and what they're really looking for.
The episode gives an interesting example where someone was asked a really technical question and they didn't have a perfect answer.
Yeah.
But instead of panicking, they took a breath, acknowledged that they didn't have all the details, and then talked about their approach to problem solving.
So they demonstrated their thought process.
Yes.
Even if they didn't have the right answer.
Right.
That's a good way to show that you can think on your feet.
And the interviewer was actually impressed with their honesty.
Wow.
They were willing to be vulnerable.
I guess that's a good reminder that it's okay to not know everything.
Exactly.
It's how you handle those situations that really matters.
And that brings us to another important part of using emotional intelligence.
Building rapport.
And this is where empathy comes in, right?
Yes. Remember, the interviewer isn't just trying to fill a position.
Right.
They're looking for someone who's a good fit.
Someone they can see themselves working with every day.
So it's about more than just skills. It's about personality and communication style.
Exactly. And the episode actually suggests an interesting technique. Mirroring.
Mirroring. Like looking in a mirror.
No. It's about subtly matching the interviewer's energy and communication style.
Oh, okay.
So if they're very formal and serious, you might want to tone it down a bit.
Right.
But if they're more casual, you can let your personality come through.
So it's about reading the room And adapting your approach.
Yes.
To make the interaction more comfortable.
Exactly. And mirroring goes beyond just words.
Okay.
It can include body language and tone of voice. If the interviewer leans forward, you might subtly lean forward too.
Oh, interesting.
If they speak softly, you might lower your volume.
So it's about creating a sense of synchronicity?
Yes.
But it's important to do it in a way that feels natural, right?
Definitely. You don't want to seem like you're trying too hard.
Right. You don't want to be mimicking them.
It's about finding that sweet spot. Now, another part of emotional intelligence is demonstrating emotional regulation during the interview.
Right. And that goes back to managing those nerves.
Exactly. But even if you're feeling calm at the start, things can happen that throw you off.
Oh, yeah. Like a tough question.
Right, or some tough feedback.
So what do?
The episode says to just take a deep breath.
Okay.
If you feel yourself getting flustered, just pause, take a deep breath, and center yourself.
It's like hitting the reset button.
It gives you a chance to gather your thoughts.
Right.
The episode also talks about being honest if you don't know an answer.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Nobody expects you to know everything.
Right.
It's much better to admit you don't know something than to try to bluff your way through it.
And I guess you can even use it as a chance to show that you're willing to learn.
Exactly. You could say something like, "That's a great question. I'm not familiar with that, but I'd love to learn more."
Right.
Then give an example of how you've learned something new in the past.
That's a great way to show that you're adaptable.
So we've talked about active listening, rapport, and emotional regulation.
Yeah. What else should we keep in mind?
Asking thoughtful questions.
This is something I struggle with. I usually just draw a blank.
It's common, but the episode has some helpful advice.
Okay.
Prepare a few questions in advance, but don't just ask generic questions.
Right, like what's the company culture like?
Yeah, those can sound kind of scripted.
Yeah.
Instead, think of questions that show you were paying attention.
Okay.
And that you're really curious.
So like what?
You could ask, what are the biggest challenges facing the team right now? Or what does success look like in this role?
Those are good. They show that you're really thinking about the job.
Exactly.
And not just the job description.
Right. The episode also suggests asking about the interviewer's experience at the company.
Oh, okay.
Something like, what's been your favorite part about working here?
That's a good one. It shows that you're interested in them as a person.
And it can give you some insights into the company culture.
So it seems like emotional intelligence can really help you during an interview.
It can. It helps you connect with the interviewer.
Yeah.
But it's not just about getting the job, is it?
That's true. This makes me think about how these skills can be helpful in other parts of our work lives.
Right, like collaborating with colleagues or navigating tough conversations or advocating for yourself.
It's all connected.
And that leads us to a final thought for our listeners.
Okay, so we've talked about how to use emotional intelligence, like, to get ready for an interview.
Right.
But what about when you're actually in the interview?
That's when it gets really interesting. No matter how much you prepare, you can't predict everything.
Yeah, like you might get a question that really throws you off.
Exactly. Or the interviewer might have a totally different communication style.
Right. That's when it's so important to be adaptable. And the Pathway to Work episode really emphasizes active listening.
Active listening.
Yeah.
What's that?
So it goes beyond just like hearing the words.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to the interviewer's tone, their body language, even just the energy in the room.
So you're not just like passively listening.
Right. You're not just waiting for your turn to speak.
You're really trying to understand what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The episode gives a good example.
Oh, okay.
Where someone was asked a really technical question and they didn't know the answer.
Oh, yeah. That's happened to me.
But instead of just panicking or freezing up,
they
took a deep breath,
Yeah.
admitted they didn't know all the details,
Okay.
but then they talked about their approach to problem solving.
So they showed how they think.
Exactly.
Even if they didn't have the right answer.
And that's a good way to show that you're adaptable.
Yeah. That you can think on your feet.
The episode says the interviewer was really impressed with their honesty.
Wow.
Because they were willing to admit that they didn't know something.
It's hard to be vulnerable like that.
It is. But it's a good reminder that you don't have to know everything.
It's how you handle those situations.
That brings us to another important part of using emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Building rapport.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where empathy comes in.
Right. You're trying to see things from the interviewer's point of view.
Remember, the interviewer isn't just trying to fill a position. They're looking for someone who would be a good fit for the team.
Right. someone they can see themselves working with.
So it's not just about skills on paper.
Right. It's about personality and communication style, too.
And all those little cues that tell you if you're on the same page.
Yeah. The episode mentions this interesting technique called mirroring.
Mirroring. Like looking in a mirror.
No. It's about subtly matching the interviewer's energy and communication style. So if they're super serious, you might want to tone down your enthusiasm a bit.
Okay.
But if they're more laid back, you can let your personality show.
So you're reading the room and adapting your approach.
Exactly. And it's not just about what you say.
Oh, right.
It can be your body language, too.
Like what?
If they lean forward, you might lean forward a little, too.
Interesting.
If they're speaking softly, you could lower your voice.
So you're creating this sense of connection.
Exactly.
But you don't want to be too obvious about it, right?
You don't want to seem like you're trying too hard.
Or like mimicking them.
Right. It's about being subtle.
So another aspect of emotional intelligence is demonstrating emotional regulation during the interview.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is. And that goes back to what we talked about before.
Right.
About managing those nerves.
But even if you go in feeling calm,
right,
things can happen. Things you can't prepare for.
Like a really unexpected question.
Exactly. Or the interviewer might give you some really tough feedback.
So what should you do?
The episode suggests a simple but powerful technique. Just take a deep breath.
Okay.
If you're feeling flustered, just pause for a second.
Yeah.
Breathe deeply and center yourself.
Like hit the reset button.
And it gives you a chance to think about your response.
Right. The episode also talks about being honest when you don't know an answer.
Oh, man, that's a hard one.
It is.
Yeah.
But nobody expects you to know everything.
Right.
It's much better to admit that you don't know something.
Okay.
Than to try to fake it.
Yeah. And I guess you can use it as a chance to show that you're eager to learn new things.
Exactly. You could say something like, that's a great question. I haven't worked with that before, but I'm a fast learner. And then you can give an example of how you've learned something new in the past.
So we've talked about active listening, rapport, emotional regulation.
Is there anything else we should keep in mind?
Asking good questions.
Ugh. That's the part I always struggle with.
Yeah, a lot of people do. But the episode has some good advice.
Okay.
Prepare a few questions ahead of time, but don't just ask generic questions.
Like, what's the company culture like?
Yeah, exactly. Those sound so canned. So try to ask questions that show that you were really listening.
Okay.
And that you're genuinely curious.
So give me an example.
Okay. You could ask something like, what are the biggest challenges the team is facing right now?
Okay.
Or what does success look like in this role?
Those are good because they show that you're really thinking about the job.
And not just the job description.
Right.
They also recommend asking about the interviewer's own experience at the company.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
You could ask, what's been your favorite part about working here?
Oh, I like that one.
It shows you're interested in them as a person.
And you can get some real insights into the company culture.
So it seems like emotional intelligence can really help you in an interview.
And not just to get the job.
That's true. These skills are helpful in all parts of our work lives.
Absolutely. Like working with other people.
Right.
Or dealing with difficult conversations or advocating for yourself.
So connected.
And that leads to a final thought for our listeners.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about how emotional intelligence can help you actually land a job.
Right.
But this Pathway to Work episode, it goes even further. It argues that these skills are important for like your whole career.
Yeah, not just getting the job, but like actually being successful once you're there.
And it makes sense when you think about it. All those challenges we face at work, working with all kinds of different people, dealing with conflict, being a good leader, you need emotional intelligence for all of that.
It's not just about being good at your job technically anymore.
It's about connecting with people and understanding where they're coming from and managing your own emotions when things get tough.
The episode gives a good example about this manager who had a team member that was always missing deadlines.
Oh, yeah.
And the work wasn't very good.
We've all been there.
Right.
So what did they do?
Instead of just like reprimanding them, the manager decided to try something different.
Okay.
So they sat down with the team member, not to criticize them, but to really understand what was going on.
Okay.
And they found out that the person was feeling overwhelmed.
Oh, okay.
Like they didn't have the support they needed to do the job well.
So the manager used their emotional intelligence to see things from the employee's perspective.
Yeah.
And that helped them figure out what the real problem was.
Exactly. And they were able to work together to find a solution. So they gave them some extra training, adjusted their workload a bit, and tried to create a more supportive environment.
And it sounds like that really made a difference.
It did. The employees' performance got a lot better.
Wow.
And they were more engaged
That's great.
and motivated.
It's a good example of how emotional intelligence can really change things for the better.
It's about going deeper.
Yeah.
Understanding what's really driving people's behavior.
This episode has really changed the way I think about emotional intelligence. I used to think it was just kind of a nice-to-have skill.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's essential if you want to navigate the workplace.
Yeah. You have to be able to build strong relationships and communicate effectively and lead with empathy.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, I'm ready.
We talked about all the good things about emotional intelligence.
Right.
But are there any downsides? Could being too emotionally aware or too empathetic actually backfire sometimes?
That's a good question. I guess in some situations, like high-stakes negotiations or a crisis, maybe you need to be a little more detached and analytical.
And there's always a risk of burnout.
Yeah, especially in jobs where you're dealing with people's emotions all the time.
So it's about finding the right balance.
Yeah.
Recognizing how powerful emotional intelligence can be, but also knowing when to protect yourself.
It's an ongoing process.
So that's something for all of us to think about as we develop our emotional intelligence.
It's a journey of learning and self-discovery.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into emotional intelligence.
It's been great.
We covered a lot.
Yeah, we did.
From acing interviews to building a successful career.
It's all connected.
And remember, emotional intelligence isn't some magical thing.
Right.
It's a set of skills that you can develop over time.
So keep learning and keep exploring the power of emotional intelligence.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new topic. Until then, keep those brains engaged and those hearts open.